Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scherr.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb.
After a week off, we are back with a jam-packed episode. We are joined by Julius Hernandez. Julius serves as the Director of Advocacy for the Institute of Digital Humanity. He has been heavily involved in DFL politics, working on races from Minneapolis City Council, state legislature, and Congress. We are going to start by breaking down some issues right here in Minnesota. First off, we will get into the controversy surrounding a Satanic display at the state capitol. Then we will break down some recent news within the Republican Party of Minnesota from their state central committee meeting over the weekend where delegates elected a new chair of the MNGOP. Then we will hit on some national news that is on everyone's mind, drones. And we will end by discussing my favorite topic of late, our Pick'ems League. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Becky, I just have to say at the beginning, one thing we should have included in Julius, by the way, great to see you. We were off last week. We just needed a week off. Creative differences. One thing we didn't put in Julius's bio is that he's a Chicago Bear fan. And yes, oof, very well said. Oof is becoming, I have a neighbor across the street that types out oof and she says oof, and I think it's pretty good. I like the rise.
I use oof pretty often.
I like oof a lot too. Speaking of oof, last night, Julius, you had a tough night. And Julius is a Chicago Bear fans, which I want to memorialize in the record of this podcast for all eternity. Number two, Julius, I'm a lifelong Vikings fan. And when the Vikings win, which they're doing a lot this season, I usually wear, and aside from formal, if I'm attending a black tie event or some type of formal affair, I wear Vikings attire, which I have a ton of, any day after the Vikings win. And so 12 times this year, I've wore Vikings outfit the day after a game. 12 times they've won, Julius. And so last night they won against your Bears of Chicago. A pitiful display last night. But again, I want to welcome you to the show.
So welcoming.
Yeah, that was probably the best welcome I think I've ever had. And listen, we're gonna let you have your fun because we're gonna take it back to North and we're never giving it back.
Yeah.
No, Michael, I don't know if your wife, Packer fan, is the same as my husband, Packer fan, but the only thing they dislike more than a Vikings fan is a Bears fan.
That's right. That's right. Although my wife is an incredibly good sport, which just drives me crazy. It's just an absolute fair sport. She's competitive, wants the Packers to win, always wants the Packers to win, but also is just an overall good sport, which drives me crazy. But yes, nobody likes the Chicago Bears. I'm surprised you even have a team.
But I just want to be clear, right? The Packers and Vikings, the Packers and Bears rivalry will always be more historic and more relevant to NFL than the Vikings will ever be. So I'm glad that we're.
I hope you enjoyed your Becky.
Peace out, Julius.
Yeah. So the Vikings won last night, and I'm on cloud nine. I loved it. It was a great game. I didn't go because I have a sister that was interested in the GD halftime show, which was Vanilla Ice. So I stayed home and watched the game, which is probably for the best because I don't think anything good happens after 6:00 anyway. So it's a good place to be at home. I went to last year's game, which the Bears did win. A Monday Night Football. I went with my daughter, but Vanilla Ice was the halftime show. Let me also give you a controversial take, which I'll be announcing on social media later. I do not like the white uniforms. I'm not a fan of the color white on sports outfits. It looks good on Luke Skywalker, and that's about it. And so I'm not a fan of the white uniforms. Let me clarify that. So I went to the whiteout game. I've been to the first whiteout game the Vikings did last season. I think it was last season or the season before. It looks great in the experience because there's the pregame. They do a lot of the aesthetics with the Nordic, defend the North, which is something Julius doesn't know anything about, defending the North and stuff like that. So there's a lot of atmosphere and snow. But the contrast last night, I was watching in my living room. I, of course, wore white, the couple white things that I have. I spilled chocolate ice cream all over the front of it when I was on the phone. So it just frustrates me. But I'm very excited. And I'm just a very excited Vikings fan there.
Cheers. Congratulations.
Yep. So one
Great
football
fantasy
topic
week.
I'm going to be really excited to talk about today.
All right. Let's talk a little bit into this new display up at the Minnesota State Capitol for, I don't know what period of time, but it's up currently during the holiday season. The Satanist display that is going on and obviously causing some controversy. It's a group that on their website says that their members champion the symbol of Lucifer as one of revolt against arbitrary authority and advocacy for the pursuit of knowledge. They say they don't directly worship Satan or believe in Satan, Although their Facebook post did say Hail Satan, maybe they need to look at their bylaws there. But it has some controversy because it is the holiday season. It is Christmas coming up. Hanukkah is coming up. Religious holidays on all sorts of different levels across the map are often celebrated at this time of year. And a lot of folks feel this is in direct contrast and maybe directly in the face of that. I want to throw it over to you guys first to get your take. Julius, yes, this should be allowed. No, this should not be allowed.
Yeah, I think religious freedom is one of the things that this country was founded on. So I think yes, I think it should be allowed, but with the exception that if there's going to be other religious displays, they should also be allowed as well. I think also a misconception about Satanism is that it's like an actual religion that believes in Satan as some sort of higher power, which I think is not true. My understanding is that it's more of a view of morality. And so, yeah, I think if you put Christian in other states, there's 10 commandments in schools and prayer in schools and the 10 commandments on state capitol grounds. So then if that's the case, we should have other opposing religious views allowed in other parts of the government. Yeah, I guess.
The listeners will be surprised to know that I'm pro-Satan. No, this is what I am. A couple of things.
I think some of the listeners think you are Satan.
That's
But
right.
let's
Exactly.
move on.
Yes, yes. First of all, by the way, just be mindful. This is a very powerful episode because let me just give you my general take on religion, which I think I've said before. Religion is like exercise. I want to know it's a part of your life, but I don't want to see you doing it. Okay. So I'm a religious person. So I believe in heaven. I believe in hell. I believe in God, and I believe in Satan. I generally refer to him more formally as Beelzebub or the Prince of Darkness, but Mephistopheles or things like that, which can sometimes get confused with vampires and other types of stuff. But generally, Prince of Darkness, Satan, is who I generally will make a reference point to. We're taking a bold stand against Satan today because what we're saying, because Becky started off by saying apparently they don't worship Satan, but their website does. She's bringing up an internal fight now that's going to be happening with the Satanists. Number two, I would be considered a huge lib on the First Amendment. I'm a huge advocate of the First Amendment. I have long held the position that burning a flag should be constitutionally protected. I am a huge lib on the First Amendment. It's why, as I've done a lot of journalism, I've done a lot of writing, and I'm a huge advocate of the First Amendment. That being said, I think that what is most disappointing to me about this display is the lack of creativity that went into it. You would think that the Satanists would do a better job. This looks like something that was bought at it looks like a paper mache display that was left over at a what do they call those? The Spirit Halloween stores. It looks like the Capitol Rotunda has been overtaken by a Spirit Halloween. It's not that creative. But on a serious note, I do think that it's difficult for me to see the people out there saying that here's what I would do. If I could run the Capitol, I think there should be I would remove religious displays from there. A Christmas tree isn't considered a religious display. You can have a Christmas tree up just to prevent this type of, I think it brings out a lot in people, but from the standpoint of the First Amendment, if we're going to allow a religious display, to Julius's point, I respect and appreciate his understanding that in many ways, Satanism is not considered a religion, but it's looked upon in that way. I think that what this group is attempting to do is, and they've done this across the country, I don't know if it's the same group, but this type of play of getting a satanic display in the rotunda of this week or around this time of year is what they do, which is in keeping with what do you think Satan would want them to do, the Prince of Darkness, even though they don't say they worship him. But I think that what's interesting about this is the number of people who consider themselves to be advocates of the Constitution, so much as they want to have tattoos of the Constitution on them. They're out there saying that the government needs to strip this display away. I think is not constitutionally consistent.
This is something, from my understanding, the Department of Administration is the one who gets these kind of permits or requests and grants or denies them. The Walz administrator or Governor Walz says that the governor does not agree with the display and did not approve it, but the First Amendment means that he does not police speech in the Capitol. His spokesperson in a statement went on to say the First Amendment means that he does not police speech in the state capitol. That's true whether it's a religious display, a political protest, or a Minnesota advocating for a policy.
What do we think of that?
I think it's a decent statement that says pretty much nothing. So bravo to any
It
comms
doesn't
director.
say anything. He's on the side of the First Amendment.
That
I'm
is
sorry if
true.
that doesn't mean anything to you.
It does. But here is mine. And I was trying to pull back. I really
Please
think
take the pro-Satan side. Please.
uh,
I'd love this podcast to be framed as Becky takes the side of Satanists against the First Amendment. Please take that side.
no, I guess I technically may be coming against the First Amendment, but I was trying to pull back from an interview we did, and I can't recall who it was with, but I believe that at some point we had a conversation about how the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion are rights that exist, but that doesn't mean that they exist universally everywhere. And that's one of the things that I think that I struggle with here is that it's one thing if you're standing outside of the Capitol and having your protest and doing your things, but is this something that needs to be approved by the government to be on display at a time when there is so much strife going on between different religions and non-religious folks and folks who are trying to I am having a hard time forming my words here, but folks who disagree, right? We just had swastikas painted on the side of the temple here that Dean Phillips and Mayor Fry and others attend. When we have a time of this, it just seems like it's a little bit of a middle finger just in spite of having a middle finger, which I do understand under the First Amendment is people's prerogative, right? If you want to be an a-hole just to be an a-hole, technically that's your right. You do have that right to do. But from my perspective, it that those amendments don't give you a free blanket to have those rights in all places across the map. And while I agree with you, I don't necessarily think we need to have a huge Christian and Jewish and all of these other different religious displays celebrating holidays up at the Capitol. I just struggle with this one that seems, I understand why they granted it because it is hard to not. I know Iowa had a similar controversy, I think last year with this. It just to me seems a little, I don't get it. I don't know. So I guess maybe consider me anti-First Amendment, anti-freedom of religion,
But not pro-Satan.
but not pro-Satan.
Okay. Julius.
Yeah, I think it all really comes down to like the conversation of church versus state, right? If this is a religious display in context, what is the Capitol's oversight and what can be considered a religious display put in the Capitol Rotunda or wherever it was placed in the Capitol? But I think again, there's a lot of people there, especially a lot of lawmakers in the state that have just expressed pro-religious agendas that they want to implement into state policy, into state law. And I think if you're willing to make those claims, then just because something offends you and it's a different religion, you can't then all of a sudden be anti-religion in some way mixed into government. I just think I agree with Becky. I think this was meant to be really more of a provocative display than anything else. And I think you're seeing kind of some hypocrisy in the responses about whether religion should be displayed in government in any way, shape, or form. But I think it would be odd to say that this shouldn't be allowed. And then I actually have a different disagreement with you too, Michael, about the Christmas tree. I think Christmas is based in Christian, like it's founded by a religious context. And so if in that sense too, maybe a Christmas tree shouldn't be allowed in the
The
Capitol.
Christmas tree, I think, has since been adopted as being a non-religious symbol, meaning that that governments can display them.
Yeah,
and it doesn't. It's moved along from just being That's
yeah.
But keep going. I don't want to interrupt him.
And so that's really just my opinion. There is, what's your opinion on church versus state, or church separation
You
of
might
church
have
and
to
state?
have the debate sometime. Sounds like a fun one to me.
But I just think if you're going to allow other religious displays in the Capitol, then whether this one offends you or not, it should be allowed. And you just have to take that into context when maybe, let's say, a Jewish organization or a Christian or Muslim organization asks to put up a religious display in the Capitol. Those same people then cannot claim foul when that does, if or when that does become the case.
Correct. And what I would say is, I think that if you look at the timing, first of all, if we just, not to preach, but assuming we all have some rudimentary believing of religion amongst the three of us, this is a strategic move by the Satanists to get Christians and others, religious, fighting, not just Christians, but get people fighting over the holidays. And so I think the move should have been, first of all, if I wanted to dominate that space during the season and to prevent the Satanists from doing this again, I would probably ensure that there's some type of display over this period to prevent the Satanists from doing this. Satanists are apparently good at paperwork. They slipped one past the goalie. They got the display over the holiday season, over the Christmas season, holiday season. That should be a shout out to the other religious groups to stand up and get your paperwork in on time to occupy that space so they don't do it. So number one, then the other point is I would have ignored it, or I would have done not ignored it. I wouldn't have raised the standing, which I think that the Satanists want, which is to have this legal debate. What I would have done is drown them out with prayer. I would have drowned them out in song and in celebration and joining together. I watched just a couple of days ago, I watched How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And if you think of the Satanists a little bit like the Grinch, what did he listen to after all the presents were gone? He saw that all of Whoville was singing and around the tree. That's what should be done, is this should be a moment for people to come together, not to fight about the legality of what the Satanists are doing, but to embrace the message of the holiday season and stand together against the evil and reject the fight that the Satanists and their organization is trying to have us all engage in right now. And that's what I hope that's done. I want to disclose on this topic, on this part.
I would like to envision now you watching The Grinch with your family and be jumping up and exclaiming, aha, that's what they should have done against the Satanists. That's how I envision that went down. So beautiful, wonderful.
But can we also just say, and I don't mind, my name is obviously Michael. Michael is the archangel. My mom constantly reminds me that's why she picked that name, even though I don't think she did. But she likes to tell me that Michael was one of the archangels that helped drive Satan out. And I don't mind taking this bold stance again against this. I'm really disappointed with the creativity. I really expected it to be, I had to look and this is a satanic display? That looked like something on a pottery barn, which may make sense. But I just think that there should have been, if you're going to do the Satan bit, just do it full regalia. There should have been a lot more theatrics.
You wanted some horns and some.
I'm thinking something like an Iron Maiden concert. There should have been something like that, or like a Black Sabbath concert or something like that. Maybe Kiss in the 70s, something like that should have been aggressively going on. But I was a little disappointed in the display. And it's just another reason I'm just disappointed in Satan and their movement in general.
Before we move on to our next topic, my mind is just all over the map. And you brought up the angel Michael, and who can talk about the angel Michael without talking about the lovely movie with John Travolta? Man, that is a good movie.
That is good, yes.
Very underrated.
Very underrated, yes.
All right, moving on. Over the weekend, the Republican Party of Minnesota held their state central committee meeting. This is a group made up of some, I think, 300, 350 delegates, some seated alternates, folks that are more looked at as a dedicated activist base, some party insiders that get together and conduct party business from bylaws and constitution. They do a lot of work before the state state convention every other year, and they elect the party officers. And so this year we had Chair David Hann running for a second term against a slate of candidates. And I believe it was on the third ballot. He was defeated. Current chairman David Hann was defeated by Wayzata City Council member Alex Plekich. Plekich was previously an RNC National Committee man for Minnesota. He's a former Marine, worked for Exxon investment banking companies, was a recruiter. And let's just start there. So, Julius, obviously big news. There is a new chair. The incumbent chair was defeated. As our resident DFLer here on the matter, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it's obviously I'm the least qualified to speak on the MNGOP, but I think I also, from just in a perspective of seeing what's happening with the MNGOP, seeing what's been happening for a really long time with them, I think this is just going to be the same old boring stuff. You're going to have someone that's not creative, doesn't have a vision that's forward thinking. And I think it's just going to come down to you guys are going to get your butt kicked again in the next cycle of elections. Because it's just an old white guy leading a party of people who are very activist driven, meaning it just feels like the very far activist wing of the party is made their choice, and that's what you guys are going to get in the elections is a base of people that, or a base of candidates and a leader that embraces that part of your party that doesn't actually align with a majority of Minnesotans. Not to slam on them any worse than they already are. They're doing it themselves, but I don't see any creativity. I think Han was probably, or Han, sorry, was probably the better choice just because he seems fairly more normal, and Action for Liberty hated him, which is always a promising sign.
Michael, obviously a former deputy chair of the party, you know the inside scoop of how these elections are run and just what the basis of the party and the state central committee is these days. What's your take on the situation as it went down and our new chair?
Let me just say this. We've had the opportunity to have Chairman Han on the podcast a few times. We've obviously had the executive director on. Look, I should disclose again, which everybody knows, I was a Republican for Harris. I've considered myself to be a little bit of a homeless Republican. I have long held the position, though, that Chairman Han understood the balance that needed to happen between the activist wing of the party and those of the party who he recognized, I think, the need for a big tent and the composition of it. And what I think is disappointing in this is the fact that Plekish, the incoming chair, this was largely driven by the Action for Liberty wing of the party. That is the non-electable wing of the party. I just have to say that to you, is that as much as Republicans, and particularly MAGA Republicans, like to act as if they won something this past election cycle, the party's in a tough spot now. They've taken a step back. Chairman Han came into a tough situation after the last chair left. He came in and helped get the party out of debt, lead it through, I think, a challenging time where there was a very polarizing candidate amongst Republicans for president, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump won nationally. He's now the president, but Republicans didn't win in this state. And if you look at, and I would argue, and I think it's a good discussion for us to have after the new year more, but it's part of the reason I think that Republicans lost is because of the association with MAGA and the liberty aspect of the party that seems to be the worst group of people that doesn't like to play in the sandbox with others. And that's ultimately what's needed for Republicans to win in the state. It's a recognition that this is not Alabama, this is not Mississippi, and that this is a state that is not a pure red MAGA state. On a good day, it's purple, Vikings purple. It's a good state. And so what that means is that Republicans in this state need to learn how to work together and play together in the sandbox. So what disappoints me is how Action for Liberty and the MAGA wing, the Liberty wing of the party, I shouldn't say just MAGA because there's a lot of people who are MAGA now, but the Action for Liberty wing of the party is excited, is embracing this. They consider this as a takeout of Han, as a coup at the top of the leadership. And that is one of the fastest ways to drain the resources of the party, to drain the money of it, because the donor community doesn't recognize that. The donor community doesn't recognize and identify with that Liberty wing. And one thing that I will say to folks, that I'll need to remind folks, is that as much as I consider myself a Republican, the last election cycle, I spent a lot of time talking to Republicans in the suburbs and across the state who believed that Donald Trump is not the type of Republican candidate that they identify with. And they still don't believe that. And so for anyone, and we've talked about this on previous episodes post-election, Becky, which is the Republicans who are out there saying, if you're not a MAGA Republican, if you're not this type of Liberty Republican, you need to leave. That's not a recipe for success. Republicans did not win. The Republicans, as where it sits right now, they have a tie in one chamber. Best case scenario, they temporarily pick up a seat, but Republicans did not contribute to the national success. The Republican endorsed candidate for the United States Senate in Minnesota, Royce White, got his ass kicked by Senator Klobuchar and ran such an uncredible race that she was able to spend time boosting up the rest of the DFL ticket in other places. The second congressional district candidate lost by over 50,000 votes. We no longer have any competitive seats in this district. And a large part of that is because of this Liberty A for L faction that has taken over and is getting involved in the party apparatus to the point where they're deciding who can and can't be a part of this. I want to just share one thing. I obviously I offered some analysis coming into the chair's race, and I wanted to make a note because I could see the Action for Liberty people out there embracing embracing this Alex Plekish's candidacy leading up to the state central. I put out I put out a tweet and sent out an email to some folks that I have on my list, talking about how Plekish's journey of being, because Alex Plekish was not, he supported Ben Carson at first, and he was a Rubio delegate. He was quoted in the media saying that Donald Trump wasn't his first pick. Eventually, he came around and started supporting Trump. That journey is the journey of a lot of Republicans in this state. One thing I will say as a Republican for Harrison, I'm not trying to filibuster, but just make this point, which is that I was surprised after I made that decision, how many people that I realized who were now supporting Trump had also had that same journey. Some of the most MAGA people in this state were not pro-Trump people, and they came around to support him. That's great that they did. But the fact that their political journey didn't start with Trump and that they had concerns, I thought showed something that should be acknowledged, that Alex Plekish had that, because the Action for Liberty wing has taken him over. They are celebrating. They are spiking the football. They are end zone dancing. And there's not a quicker way in this state for money to dry up for the Republican Party is than to have for A4L and those goofballs out there saying that they now are in control of the party apparatus and the party operation. I was very disappointed by Plekish's response to my analysis. He sent out a text accusing me of doing something illegal by offering analysis. It was the goofiest response I've ever seen. And so I am a Republican who wants to see Republicans succeed, but having been in the trenches, particularly this last election cycle, and have seen how it goes, the Action for Liberty wing, the Liberty wing of the party, is not a way to build the party. They do not play well with others in the sandbox. And I think there's a real concern that Chairman Plekish, an incoming Alex Plekish, when he officially becomes the chair, that he's going to dial back a lot of the common sense reforms that were done to make this party, to have it go back on some of the work that Chairman Han had succeeded in. And again, I disagreed with Chairman Han a lot, but he was at least providing, I think, adult leadership and balance. Because one last point I'll make is that as of today, who are the Republican candidates for statewide office? We have Royce White, who's running for United States Senate. We have Philip Parrish, who has announced that he's running for governor, and Scott Jensen might run for governor too. Those are the only candidates. And so one of the best indicators of the success and the faith that Minnesotans have in the party are people willing to stand up and run for statewide office. And I'm sorry, those three candidates aren't going to cut it. And Alex Plekish, he needs to recognize that jumping into the sandbox with Action for Liberty and that Liberty wing is not a way to build a party.
So much to break down here. I, of course, need to agree on some and disagree on some. And to be perfectly frank, I had no horse in this race. I know very little about Alex Plekish outside of what I've read and seen. I was not involved in the state central committee.
I wasn't there. I was at home.
And haven't been involved in inter-party working since end of 2020. So starting there, I'll start with the Chair Han side of things. I agree with you largely on a lot of Chair Han and his accolades. I think that he was a reasonable, smart, steady hand and adult at the table. And it's something that I think the Republicans in this state and in this country greatly needed. I like a boring chair. I like a chair that doesn't make it really about them. That's not their job. Their job is to lift up policies of elected legislators and Congress people that are currently serving and support what our electeds are doing. And then most importantly is to win elections by supporting our endorsed candidates. So it's not meant to be about who the chair is personally and then them making a big name for themselves. So I think that David Han did do a great job and was an adult in the room and had right-sized things a little bit from the chaos that he stepped into. I think that he brought some legitimacy back to some donors who were worried. But I also do know that there has been a lot of criticism about him. Some of the things that you mentioned, the CD2 losing by $50,000 or 50,000 votes, the spending and fundraising. I know there's been a lot of criticism, which there always is from activists and different outside groups. Some folks can put that on the party chair, and that's what a lot of the candidates against him did do in this race, and was probably part of his demise here. It does, again, I don't know Alex Plekish personally or much more about him than what I've seen and read. He has stated since the convention or committee meeting that he wants to bring all organizations affiliated with the Republican Party into the tent and is laser focused on winning in 2026. Bravo for that goal. I think it's something that Republicans in this state have been trying to do for a decade plus. I think, unfortunately, it's our biggest issue here in the state is that we have different groups who decide that their thoughts and opinions and strategies are the only way forward. And if you're against them, you're against them. And unfortunately, Action for Liberty being one who would rather elect Democrats than a Republican they agree with 70 or 80% of the time, which is never going to get us anywhere. Pluckish has also said fundraising is a top priority, and he intends to tap into donors who recently stopped giving to the party. Again, I think is a goal that we can applaud, but again, easier said than done. So it's anytime this is something we've looked at on the DFL side, right? We've had Ken Martin, who has been there for a decade plus, who has been a common steady hand that folks can look to and can build on year after year. He's had his track record. He's been able to do that. It's something that obviously I would love the Republican Party to be able to find in a chair that is somebody that can continue to have progress for 2 years and move that forward in another election cycle and continue to build those relationships with donors and these affiliated organizations and continue to move the ball forward. But until we break down some of these silos between these organizations, I just don't see that happening. And unfortunately, with the way Action for Liberty is run and their little lane that they've carved out, I don't know that they're willing to do anything to concede their silos that they have and their blockades around their path forward. So all that to say, I want to be cautiously optimistic about the Republican Party moving forward and Republicans in the state moving forward. I'm not super optimistic about it, but I guess without any personal knowledge, we have to let them sink or swim, and that's going to happen really quick. We're going to get more candidates dropping their name in the race. There's a lot of different arguments and controversy within the party, within the inter-party workings of the CDs, CD7 and their issues with Fishbach not endorsing, CD2, all of their issues not endorsing. And then at the BPOU level, let's not even get started about those different inter-party issues that the new chair has to step into and work to calm down, because at the end of the day, that is a big part of what the state party chair is meant to do, is also working with those lower party units. So I am not envious of this job. I am not envious of anybody involved in it. I want to be optimistic, but it is tough. Anytime that an incumbent chair is overthrown, I understand the issues within the party. I wish that wasn't the case. I'm not exactly sure all that went into both sides, and I'm sure the whisper campaigns, but man, the drama at these committee meetings can be high. And once you get the momentum on your side, it just steamrolls into a victory like it did for Alex Pluckish over the weekend.
Yeah, I think we'll see what happens. I'll have more to say. I'm gonna watch. I think it'd be a great episode after we get to the holidays. There's a short transition period. I'll be curious to see. Again, I just would say one of the things that I remember being a party officer and saying, someone told me once, it was great advice, which was 30% of the activists don't like it just because you're in the incumbent. And so there's always that challenge. One of the things that I think that the Republican Party does an absolutely amazing job at is bringing people into the leadership position, grinding them up into a pulp, and then shitting them out the other side. And I think it's really unfortunate that happened. And I think that stability is what was needed. And I think to see Action for Liberty out there spiking the football, to see that's not a good thing. The donor community is on the internet too. They can see this stuff. And so that's the challenge. And again, I think, not to speak for you, Becky, but I think our perspective, and I know Julius is a partisan Democrat, so what does he know? But one of the things I think the Democrats do a very good job of is they are a coalitions-based party. That's their founding. They were founded as a formation of the Democratic and the Farmer Labor Party. Republicans have to work better together in the sandbox. And when you have, I think, when you have some people throwing sand, and then the newly elected chair embracing the people that are throwing sand, I don't think that's a good recipe for success. So Pluckish is got his work cut out for him, and we'll see whether they sink or swim, but I'd be getting a lifeboat ready.
If I
And just one last comment is I always think an important part of this is watching who they surround themselves with. And so it's one thing to be affiliated on the interweb with different groups and associations. I think it will be interesting to see who does come in to the party as staffers, as some of the other positions, how they work together with these groups, the outreach that they do initially. There's going to be a lot of eyes on them. And we especially will see that with eyes on Ken Martin and his quest to DNC chair and what that means for a DFL party chair. And so we're going to be, I'm sure, talking about this quite a bit.
And if I could, just one more thing,
Yeah.
just one more thing to bounce off of what you guys have both been saying. But I think one of the things, with the obvious observations of our DFL chair probably going to be the DNC chair, more than likely, and you guys getting a new one that there's a lot of uncertainty about. I think one of the things that the DFL does well is not crushing opposition, but destroying or crushing our agents of chaos, the people who come into the party, like the Action for Liberty, like Eric Mortensen, who it doesn't actually have an agenda that they're trying to reach. They just are agents of chaos because they think that if they can rile up enough people, that'll be like a path to power. And I think we have a very left-wing part of our party that is not aligned with the mainstream of the DFL, and we have found a way to keep them in the fringe because that's where they belong with their views and the way they conduct themselves. And I think the MNGOP needs to find a way to do that. And Dash is going to have a hard responsibility because Action for Liberty got him there. And how do you now separate and become a serious chair when those are the people that are going to be probably your base while you're in that position? So I think if he can find a way to make the fringe again, which there's not a lot of hope for, at least right now, then there becomes a chance where the MNGOP becomes a healthy party again. And here's the thing, I might be a partisan hack, and I definitely am when it comes to the DFL. But a healthy GOP means a healthy DFL, because that means we have to compete and work hard for our seats, and we don't expect to just be elected because we're the DFL, and that the GOP is crazy. And so, and last thing I'll say about this, when I said boring, because Becky mentioned my boring comment, and I wanted to clarify, it's not that that they shouldn't be boring, but what is the vision? What is the vision that Plekish is putting forward that made the base say that guy's better for the job? I don't actually know what it is, and I don't think anyone can really say what it is besides maybe the fundraising part. But I'm actually very excited to see what happens because it's going to be a lot of drama, like you said. It'll be fun.
That's great insight, Julius. That was really good insight.
And I do love the agents of chaos because that is certainly something, and not only a problem here at the MNGOP, but something we've seen nationally with Republicans. They kicked out Boehner, elected Paul Ryan, grinded him to a pulp. They wanted McCarthy. This is something that we've done time and time again. And we see then with the Democrats, the DFL, I remember when there was some inter-party fighting over who was going to be majority leader in the Senate. And Democrats are able to keep it behind closed doors, right? We know those fights happen. We know that chaos can be happening there. But Democrats in the state have been doing a really good job over the years of keeping it behind closed doors. But one last thing I'm going to say on it, because I know we're going to have multiple conversations when the time comes. I really appreciate your optimism I agree, all signs are pointing to Ken Martin likely being the next DNC chair. But your optimism that the agents of chaos within the DFL being maintained in that chair race, props, man. I don't necessarily agree that's going to be the situation. I like that you have faith in your party, that you're going to be able to keep those agents of chaos at the fringes and at that. But I think it's going to be a free for all, and I am excited to watch it. And we will have you back when that time comes, because it is going to be some good conversations and some popcorn will be popped to see, I think, the first time in probably a good 10, 15 years, maybe some of the skeletons being dragged out of closets with some different factions within the DFL. I will patiently await that
We'll talk
situation.
in February.
Moving on to another controversy, general mystery of the world and the sky, and there is just so much to this. It is really hard to not get sucked into the conspiracy theory side of TikTok when it comes to things like this, but drones. We have been seeing having these sightings, mainly, specifically, I think, over the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, of mysteries in the sky or what they are not. There is a recent statement was put out by the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and Federal Aviation Authority. They released a joint statement saying having closely, and I believe this was just released in the last 24 hours.
Yep.
Having closely examined the technical data and tips from concerned citizens, we assess that the sightings to date include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, and law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wings aircraft, helicopters, and stars mistakenly reported as drones. I'm going to start with my opinion on this one.
Go right ahead.
I have 3 options of what is going on here. 1, this is either a severely mismanaged PR crisis that the government knows something, has discovered something, and has yet to figure out until the last 24 hours with this, hey, it's just drones and stars and helicopters. They just have completely failed at figuring out how to notify the American people, fill in gaps, and these conspiracy theories and misinformation has done so. B, the government is responsible, not willing to admit it because they're doing some shady crap up there. 3, they don't know anything. Also a problem. Michael, I'm going to throw it to you.
I exactly don't know. First of all, we've had some history on the breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky of talking about aerial phenomenon. If you remember, when we first started the podcast, we were talking about I believe it was the Chinese balloons that were coming over the United States. So we've entered into a new aerial phenomenon. I think I've mentioned this before, so I don't think I'm adding to my self-disclosed Oppo file. I don't think we're alone in the universe. So let me say that at the onset. I simultaneously do not believe that we're under attack in any type of way. I just don't. I don't think this. I do believe that the government has a responsibility to come up with a good answer as to what's going on, and that hasn't been done yet. And so I just think that I never thought about it growing up as a kid, but when we went through the dynamic of the balloons flying over our country, we should probably have a general idea of what's flying over our country and what's in our airspace. And I think that with everyone also having a television studio in their pocket with their phones, I don't think that we've gotten really good, definitive information from the public, from citizen journalists as to what they are, coupled with AI and other types of things. It's really difficult. I think we've really gotten into an information void here where we need people to step up. And with the lack of trust overall in the government, nothing new. I don't know, and particularly with the government's history of misinformation regarding UFOs and other flying objects, it seems to me that this is just a conspiracy. This has all the makings for a divided household on we're under attack. It's Martians or it's the government, or it's the Chinese with the balloons, or it's some kid with a drone. I do not subscribe to the belief that we're under attack. Number one, I don't believe it's UFOs, even though I don't think we're alone in the universe. And I think I'm mostly inclined to believe that the government statement seems to make sense, but I don't know. But I do believe, as I was consistent with the Chinese balloon that was flying over us, the government should know more. We should be more protective of our airspace. It goes back to something that I think our country should have invested in under Reagan, which is a good Star Wars defense. And so I'm a fan of, if we can revitalize, dust off the Star Wars plans and just have that type of Space Force, I think that would be good. Not the Trump Space Force, but the actual good one that Reagan wanted.
Before I go to Julius, so I tend to agree that we're not under attack. However, you think there's a possibility where we're under surveillance by
I think we're always under surveillance.
by other countries?
Of course. I always think we're under surveillance. That was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and Julius chime in here, but I believe that the belief was the balloon that flew over the United States was a surveillance balloon in some ways. And so I would not be surprised. I would actually be astounded if at some point the United States government didn't catch some type of drone or some type of device that's under surveillance. I think we're under surveillance all the time. By the way, Enemy of the State is a great movie to watch if you're talking about surveillance. It's a fantastic movie. It's one of Will Smith and Gene Hackman's underrated films. It's fantastic. But that being said, yeah, I think we're under surveillance. But I don't believe that this is some mass attack. Julius?
Yeah, I think so. Let me start with, I don't think this is some sort of conspiracy, and I think a couple of good reasons why. One, I searched up how many drones are registered with the FAA. There's about over 1 million.
Okay.
And how many generally are in the sky per day, including hobbyist drones that don't have to be registered. It's about 8,000. So here's 3 reasons why I don't think it's a conspiracy by any means. I think it's just probably likely what the government said it was. One, we know this administration is not competent enough to do some mass surveillance program. It's just the truth.
Or Becky
I
would
think
say, oof.
yeah, I think it's a one thing that Republicans and Democrats can agree on. This is not a super competent administration in terms of that. I don't think it's like any sort of country, because the spy balloon thing didn't work out, and I don't know if flying objects would be something that another country would go to surveil. And honest to God, who really cares about New Jersey? Really, who would want to fly something over New Jersey? If you're gonna surveil any state in the country, it's New Jersey that you pick. Really, let's be honest. And that's a joke. I don't like New Jersey, but there's that. But I also just think
to
it's
delve
like,
into that in a future episode.
I just think it's like one of those things where it's like there's 8,000 drones in the sky a day. I do think it's a little fascinating that it's become a story so quickly and that it's a consistent thing. But I don't think it's some sort of mass surveillance. I think maybe it's just some weirdos flying drones in the sky or doing something that the government maybe wasn't informed of directly. So,
Julius, have you done any previous work with Operation Blue Book on behalf of the government in previous years on UFO surveillance and other things?
Yeah, I
Anything
actually
you disclose here?
Yeah, I
You're
am actually
parroting a lot of points that the government would like us to believe on this issue.
If the U.S. government ever employs me to do any sort of spying and or surveillance, we are in deep trouble. All right.
So let me just say this. Let me just make sure my points are clear. And I'm just because I always on this type of subject, because I try to have a level head. I don't believe we're alone in the universe. I absolutely believe I do believe that there are things that have flown over the United States that we don't know what they are. I think we've seen there's been a variety of good footage that's been shown, military sources and others. Doesn't mean they're aliens, but I do think we have that. I don't believe that this is some mass attack. I do believe it's hyped up people. It could be misinformation. Now, there is a subject I would love to get into at some point, which is Bigfoot, because I think I absolutely do not believe in Bigfoot. Okay, that's a guy in a suit, and that's an entirely different thing. I watched every effing episode of Finding Bigfoot. And you know what they never did? They never found Bigfoot. Although they always say they found Bigfoot. But that's different than UFO. So just to be consistent on this podcast, we're not alone in the universe. I think our government should do a better job of letting us know what's above us in airspace. I also think there's an education program that's needed, per Julius's talking points from the federal government, about the number of aerial drones and things that people have. Because I think this is just an interesting subject, because people are really lathered up about it.
It's really the biggest fascination on my side with this is that the federal government has learned nothing since the balloon. That how many days after this started, and did it take to get a statement from the heads of these different departments? Did they learn nothing? We are in not even a 24-hour news cycle these days. We are in a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour news cycle. And so people are going to fill in the gaps.
Yes.
And especially when there are 8,000 other drones up in the sky every day, you get stories. So like I saw a TikTok video of this gentleman who flew his drone up said he had full battery, flew it up into restricted airspace and encountered another drone that was up there where they shouldn't be. And there's different mechanisms in place to shut down and do this. But he came into contact with this. His randomly said dead battery and fell out of the sky. And even though it was fully charged, all of this, but this other one was still able to maintain its height and its status in the restricted airspace. And why could that be? Does that mean that's a government? Does it mean that it's somebody else that has different equipment to go around? Now, again, this is one video that I watched on TikTok for less than 90 seconds, but
TikTok's a good source.
But it's people that are filling in the gaps that the government has not. So that's enough to put question marks in people's heads. And this is where we get, whether it's just distrust in the government or people believing conspiracy theories, this is how it starts. And I think it's just really frustrating that they didn't learn anything of, even if they're just saying, we don't know yet, we're trying to, I just feel like it was just very much silence, allowing the people to fill in their gaps, and got us to where we are here. Trump commented on Truth Social saying mystery drone sightings all over the country. Can this really be happening without the government's knowledge? I don't think so. Let the public know and now. Otherwise, shoot them down. Now, let's be clear.
I always love the proportional, calm response from our former president and incoming president, because what we need is more people just shooting into the air.
Which the federal government has said very much so. Please do not shoot them down. That is not a step that they want citizens across the country to be taking. One comment I did, Adam Kinzinger, again, former congressman from Illinois.
A fellow Republican for Harris.
Yeah, he tweeted, each of these drones have a green light on the right, a red light on the left, and a strobe light, which is required of this FAA at night. So either the aliens and Iranians are complying with FAA law or it's something else.
It's a great point.
It was a really great point. So I did like that. Again, also though, like, why is it coming from like a former congressman and not somebody? It just is, again, where I feel like that's kind of information that if that was the FAA putting it out, great, done deal. Let's wrap it up.
That's the kind of wisdom and logic I would expect from a fellow alumni of Republicans for Harris. And so I appreciate the comment.
And then lastly, Tom Emmer tweeted, either the Biden administration is lying to us or they truly don't know who is responsible for flying drones near military sites and our incoming president's property, which is worse. I also don't disagree. So it's one of those, I think that it shows the gaps and the weaknesses within the federal government, maybe the Biden administration, if we want to point that directly. It's frustrating. I also don't necessarily think it's like aliens.
Do you believe we're alone in the universe?
I did this as one more, just a little tangent, I'll say, of a gentleman on TikTok going off on this kind of thing. And he goes into the same thing and says, do I believe that aliens exist? Absolutely. Have you seen an octopus? Have you seen a parrot that knows how to speak Spanish? I don't know how to speak Spanish. Like, just going off this list of things that we actually interact with that are real animals, beings, living situations in this thing. Who's to say? Have you seen an octopus? Those things are weird.
That's a great point.
So
that's a great point.
I don't think we're alone.
Julius, do you think we're alone in the universe?
Really narcissistic to think we're alone, I guess. And sorry, Julius, if you do think we're alone, then we just shamed you.
I'm going to represent the people in this country that do believe we are alone. No, I don't think we are. I think it'd be pretty naive to think that. But also, I would like to point out the obvious here, which is why we're probably talking about drones. And it's a good topic, and there's some things that we can learn from it. One, things I've been saying for a while in this pod, which is the Biden administration has the worst communications team ever in the history of modern presidents, and they should never have jobs again. That's my personal opinion. The second thing, that's pretty intense, but it's true. It's like, to Becky's point, why did it take so long to say something? The American public freaks out about a lot, but it's like, it should be addressed to at least calm nerves. But on the flip side of that, why is our incoming president-elect, who does receive briefings now, like stoking chaos and fear, and he knows probably that this is not something super weird and crazy going on? And why does Tom Emmer and him and all these other Republicans make weird fights about everything? It's just let the government do their job for once. If it's something weird and crazy, they'll tell us. And maybe not, but they'll handle it. Maybe.
That's my point is I think that the incoming president doesn't appear to have been briefed on this. Tom Emmer doesn't appear to have been briefed on this. This is something I didn't mention earlier, but just today, Tuesday, the House Intelligence Committee is receiving a classified briefing on this quote unquote mystery. It does appear that there is some knowledge on this that is not being widely shared. And so is that concerning?
Well,
is
a conversation also concerning to be had that the first response should be shoot it out of the air from like a
as an I'm okay with you.
Don't get me wrong about that.
Now I live over the route close by of the airport. So I see some planes that come over it. If there's a drone over my house, you're darn right I'm shooting it down. I'm absolutely doing that. Okay, number one.
I just think it's crazy for a high-ranking congressman and a president-elect to say when they have been in positions of government to freak out and make other people freak out by doing this. It's like more political than it is.
That's the way it works these days.
It's so dumb.
Here's what I would do. This would be the communication thing that I would do, because I would take a combination of both your points. I'm not doing the Hail Satan sign. I'm just making the point that both on the opposite side of my screen are doing, which is Julius made a good point about the data, and then Becky always is there with the communications. If I would just do a briefing, like a high level, I don't know if the Pentagon or someone else, do a late night briefing where it's like a national address, And I would just explain stuff. I would walk them through, okay, these are how many drones that are registered. This is how many are in the air. This is what we think is going on. There's so many tools that the government has to spread information. And in some ways, they're accused of spreading misinformation. Just go out and tell people. But sometimes I think they don't know. And I think they're just too slow to react. And just to go back to it again, in the early days of our podcast, we were dealing with a balloon that was floating over the United States, and it was not being addressed.
Which, by the way, was happening during the Trump administration, we now know, and they didn't do anything about it either. So
No, I agree. Donald Trump's entire approach to politics is somewhat similar to mine, even though I don't agree with him. I think it's assess the situation and assign blame. That's generally how I get through my day. And Trump is the same way. Even though I don't agree with him and I've never voted for him, his approach is very similar to mine. Assess the situation and assign blame, but not to yourself. That's generally how I get through life.
I have to imagine we will continue to hear.
I have to agree with that.
No, I think we will hear some more about this. We'll update if there's anything significant. But man, I'm not going to miss the poor communications of the Biden administration, but I'm not ready for the wild communications from the Trump administration. So that's where we're going.
That was a bridge.
We got one more little bit. It's not too bad, right? So we wrapped up week 15 of football, the National Football League. Wrapped up week 15. We're tied still, Michael. Or no, I'm sorry. We tied this week.
Shut up.
We're not tied.
We're not tied. That's just come on. Just get to it. Just pull the trigger. Take your kill shot.
Yeah, I'm still leading by 3 points heading into the final few weeks here. How do you feel about that?
I'm angry. You want to know why? Because it was the Green Bay Packers that just screwed me on Sunday. Okay. Now they gave the Vikings a win, but they just find every way to disappoint me. They just find every way to disappoint me. And they're just a worthless organization. So yes, there's plenty of opportunity for Becky to have another technical failure like she did last season. But I'm prepared and I'm right there nipping at the heels. And I'm confident that there's going to be, this is going to be my breakout week.
Anything can happen. So there's certainly time and place. I will say the nice thing about us recording these podcasts very often on Tuesdays is I just make my picks right afterwards because it's top of mind. So I haven't forgotten yet.
Absolutely.
Great. I'll take it. I love it. Great show.
Great show. And I want to just, for our listeners who heard a wonderful animal in the background, give a shout out to who we heard.
Chuck. He's currently sitting next to me begging for pets. But yes, he likes to bark. He likes to show his little voice anytime anybody walks by or rings the doorbell. And he's a cute little mini golden doodle who just needs all the attention in the world.
That's great. Well, thank Julius. You're holding up the fort a little bit in fantasy football too in our Pick'em League. You're not gonna take Becky or I on, but
I'm pretty sure, I'm looking right now, I'm pretty sure I'm 13th out of 14.
Somebody's got to be that sad. And hopefully Becky will be joining you in the cellar soon. So,
Oh, wow.
And I've been focusing on saving democracy. I'm not really
you
sure.
can't steal my line. That's my line. I've been saving democracy. Okay.
No, I've had just as poor a season as the Chicago Bears, but it's okay. We'll do it next year and I'll be better. And I want to point out too, I mostly have just been, I'm losing because I mostly just forget to make my picks. That's really what happens. So it's not for a lack of football knowledge. I want to be very clear about that.
Julius, we want to thank you for being here today and taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this episode of The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on the platform you listen. You can also leave a review on our website and visit us across all social media platforms at BB Breakpod. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will be back soon. Have a great week.
Bye.